The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on my desk, where a framed photo of my team at a recent baby shower sat. I could still hear the laughter echoing in my mind. The warmth of their camaraderie felt like a stark contrast to the icy grip of betrayal that had just tightened around my chest. Unexpected disappointment washed over me as I replayed the meeting in my head. Jessica's backhanded comment had lingered in the air like a bad smell, her words dripping with a venomous sweetness that made my skin crawl. "You always know how to shine, Stephanie, don't you?" she had said, a smirk on her lips. Little did I know that her false praise masked a deeper treachery. That day, the team meeting had been a routine affair, or so I thought. As I sat among my colleagues, their faces blurred in my peripheral vision, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I had been a key player in securing a $2.2 billion contract, but now the stakes felt dangerously high. The tension in the room was palpable, heavy with unspoken words. I glanced at Jessica, who sat across from me, her eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. Was it paranoia, or was she truly celebrating my downfall? I had always trusted my instincts, but as I scanned the room, confusion clouded my judgment. Why would they turn on me? The thought made my heart race, each beat echoing my fear. I remembered the heartfelt gift they had presented to me just days ago, a token of appreciation that now felt like a cruel joke. I was left questioning everything. Was my trust misplaced? What had I missed? As the meeting concluded, I lingered by my desk, staring at the photo. The smiles of my colleagues felt like a distant memory, a reminder of a time when I believed in loyalty. Now I was left grappling with the realization that betrayal could come from those I held dear. My breath quickened as I realized the gravity of my situation. I had to confront Jessica, but the fear of repercussions loomed large in my mind. How could I expose her without jeopardizing my career? I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the moment, but my thoughts raced ahead. I needed clarity, a plan. The corporate politics swirling around me felt like a storm, and I was caught in its eye, unsure of how to navigate the chaos that lay ahead. The path forward was murky, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning of a battle I was not yet prepared to fight. The air in my office felt thick, almost electric, as I stared out the window. The city sprawled beneath me, a labyrinth of glass and steel, each building a monument to ambition and competition. I could smell the faint aroma of burnt coffee wafting from the break room, mingling with the sterile scent of the copier. It was a reminder of the long hours, the countless sacrifices, and the pressure that seemed to creep in with every tick of the clock. Today, I felt more like a pawn than a player in this corporate chess game. I sat down at my desk, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed a message to Mark. "Can we talk later? I need your advice about something important." As I hit send, memories of our last conversation flooded back, his concerned look, the way he hesitated before speaking, as if weighing his words carefully. I could sense his anxiety, a reflection of my own, as we both navigated this uncertain territory together. I wondered if he felt the same pressure to choose sides, especially with the tension mounting around my recent decisions. In that moment, I was reminded of the last time I confronted Jessica. It was a stark afternoon in the boardroom, where the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting harsh shadows on our faces. I had walked in, my heart pounding, fueled by a mix of determination and dread. The memory of her dismissive smirk haunted me, a reminder of the power dynamics that had shifted since the announcement of the contract's suspension. I had felt like a gladiator stepping into the arena, only to realize I was outmatched. Now, sitting in my office, I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. I wanted to confront Jessica, to challenge her on her manipulations, but the fear of repercussions loomed like a storm cloud. What if she turned the tables? What if my colleagues sided with her? I was acutely aware of the stakes. My reputation, my career, everything I had worked for was hanging in the balance. As I paced the small confines of my office, I could feel my heart racing, each beat a reminder of the urgency I felt. I had to act, but how could I do it without putting myself in the crosshairs? The walls felt like they were closing in, and I had to remind myself of my worth, of the value I brought to this company. I was not just a cog in the machine. I was a key player in a billion-dollar deal, and I would not let Jessica's deceit overshadow my contributions. My resolve hardened with each passing second, igniting a fire within me that I could no longer ignore. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened my laptop, determined to gather my thoughts. I needed a plan, a strategy to confront Jessica and reclaim my narrative. The stakes were high, but I was ready to face the storm. This time I would not be silenced. This was my moment to rise, to take back control, and to ensure that the truth would not be buried beneath layers of corporate lies. I sat across from Jessica in the restaurant, the air thick with unease. The muted sounds of clinking glasses and low conversations surrounded us, but it felt like a world apart. My fingers drummed nervously against the table, the polished surface cold against my skin, mirroring the chill creeping into my heart. Jessica leaned back, a sly smile curling her lips as if she knew the storm brewing within me. Stephanie, I can't help but wonder if you're being a little too dramatic about the whole situation, she remarked, her voice dripping with feigned concern. I could see the reflection of the flickering candlelight in her eyes, a stark contrast to the darkness of her words. My pulse quickened, anger bubbling beneath the surface like a pot ready to boil over. Dramatic. You don't understand the fallout from your actions, do you? I shot back, my voice steady despite the tremors in my hands. The tension in the air thickened as I recalled the moments leading up to this confrontation, how I had received a barrage of backhanded comments from her during meetings, how she had positioned herself as the victim while I bore the brunt of the fallout. Jessica shrugged, her nonchalance infuriating. It's just business, Stephanie, you know that, you made decisions and now you're facing the consequences. I leaned forward, my heart racing, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. Memories of our past camaraderie flashed through my mind, only to be overshadowed by the reality of this moment. Is that how you justify sabotaging me, by calling it business? I could hear the tremor in my voice, but I didn't care. I was done being the person who kept quiet, the one who let others dictate my worth. The restaurant around us felt like a cage, the walls echoing my frustration. She laughed lightly, but it lacked warmth. You're too emotional, Stephanie. You need to learn to play the game better. Her words struck like a slap, igniting a fire within me. I had trusted her, confided in her, and now she was throwing it all back in my face. I won't let you get away with this, I declared, my voice firm and unwavering. The weight of my resolve filled the air, and for the first time I felt a twinge of power. Jessica raised an eyebrow, amusement dancing on her features. Are you sure about that? You're risking everything, you know. Her challenge hung in the air, a dare that sent a shiver down my spine. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself, but the anger surged, fueling my determination. As the conversation shifted, I felt the walls of my resolve begin to crack. You think this is just about business? You've turned my life upside down. My career is on the line because of your manipulations, I spat out, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I could see the slight shift in her demeanor, the confidence faltered, if only for a moment. Maybe you should have thought about that before you made your choices, she retorted, crossing her arms defensively. Each word felt like a dagger, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I was angry, yes, but there was also a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal that threatened to consume me. Leaving the restaurant, I realized the battle was far from over. The contract was suspended, and I had to act quickly. I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, the stakes higher than ever. I needed to find a way to resolve this without escalating it further, but the anger simmered, threatening to spill over, pushing me toward a path I wasn't sure I was ready to take. As I walked through the office hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unflattering glow on the faces of my colleagues. I could feel their eyes on me, some filled with pity, others with judgment. The realization that I had to confront this injustice settled heavily in my gut. I could no longer be the passive player in this game. In the solitude of my apartment, I paced back and forth, my mind racing. I thought about the conversations with Alex, his encouragement to take a stand. I could see the tension threaded through our discussions, pushing me to confront the betrayal head-on, but with each step, doubt crept in. Did I really have what it took to fight back, or would I simply be digging my own grave? The air in my living room felt heavy, thick with anticipation and the scent of burnt coffee. I had forgotten the pot on the stove as I tried to focus on the task at hand. I paced back and forth, my fingers nervously tapping against my thigh, a nervous habit I couldn't shake off. Each step echoed the turmoil brewing inside me, each breath a reminder of the resolve I needed to muster. I had decided it was time to confront Jessica, to execute the plan I had devised with Alex. As I sat on the edge of my couch, replaying our last encounter in my mind, the bitterness clawed at me. The memory of her smug smile during that lunch meeting, where every word dripped with sarcasm, resurfaced like a bad dream. I recalled how she had dismissed my attempts to mend fences. You really thought we could just talk it out? Her condescending tone still rang in my ears. I had left that conversation feeling smaller, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. I glanced at my phone, the screen lighting up with a message from Alex. Are you ready? We can't wait too long. She might catch wind of what we're planning. His words were a jolt of reality, and I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. This was my moment, and I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed a quick response, assuring him I was ready. The drive to the office felt surreal, the familiar streets morphing into a blur of anxiety and adrenaline. I could hardly focus on the road, my mind racing with the possible outcomes of the confrontation. Would Jessica deny everything, or would she crumble under the pressure of my accusations? The thought of standing in front of her, demanding answers, sent shivers down my spine, but buried beneath the fear was a flicker of determination. I refused to let her manipulate me any longer. When I arrived at the office, the fluorescent lights felt more oppressive than ever. Each step towards my desk felt like a march into battle. I could hear the low hum of conversations, the typical office banter, but it felt like a distant echo compared to the storm brewing within me. I took a deep breath, willing myself to push through the noise and focus on my goal. As I settled into my chair, my mind wandered back to Alex's apartment, where we had meticulously laid out our plan. I remembered the intensity of our brainstorming session, the urgency in his voice as he laid out the steps we needed to take. "We expose her, Stephanie. No more hiding behind her charm," he had insisted, his eyes blazing with passion. Those words ignited a fire in my belly, propelling me forward. Moments later, I spotted Jessica walking through the hallway, her confident stride belied by the trepidation that gripped me. She caught my eye, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze, a crack in her polished facade. I took it as a sign it was time. I rose from my desk, each step deliberate as I approached her. My heart raced, thudding loudly in my chest, but I couldn't back down now. This confrontation was about more than just me. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my power. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to a guarded smile. "Stephanie, didn't expect to see you here so early. We need to talk." "Now," I replied, the firmness in my tone surprising even me. I could see the gears turning in her head, calculating her next move. "What's this about?" she asked, feigning innocence, but I could see the tension in her posture, the slight clenching of her fists. "It was my opening, about the contract suspension and your role in it," I pressed, each word laced with the weight of my conviction. As I spoke, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The confrontation escalated quickly, a dance of accusations and denials that left both of us breathless. She attempted to deflect, but I held my ground, armed with evidence and the knowledge of her deceit. With each revelation, I felt the power shift. I was no longer the victim, I was reclaiming my narrative. As the confrontation reached its peak, I realized that I wasn't just fighting for my career, I was fighting for my dignity, for the trust that had been shattered between us. With every word I uttered, I felt lighter, the burden of betrayal slowly lifting as I stood my ground against Jessica. This was my moment, and I was determined to make it count. The rain drizzled softly against the window panes of my cozy home office, a soothing rhythm that contrasted with the turmoil inside me. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the remnants of my previous attempts to mend the rift between myself and my colleagues. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, a bittersweet reminder of the countless hours I had spent trying to figure out my next move. My fingers fidgeted with the edge of my notebook, the paper crinkling beneath the pressure of my anxious grip. After the fallout from the penalty, I had hoped for a chance to bridge the divide with my team. I envisioned a gathering, a warm cafe filled with the hum of conversation, where I could express my remorse and lay out my vision for the future. But as I prepared for that day, doubt gnawed at me like a persistent shadow. Would they be willing to listen, or had my decisions permanently severed our connection? The cafe buzzed with activity, the aromas of pastries and coffee swirling together in a tantalizing blend. I arrived early, my heart racing as I took a seat at a table near the window, the sunlight filtering through the glass, casting golden rays across my notebook. I scribbled down my thoughts, trying to find the right words that would resonate with my team. Yet with each stroke of the pen, anxiety tightened around my chest. When they finally arrived, I could feel the tension in the air thickening like fog. Their expressions were guarded, eyes darting around as if searching for a reason to distrust me further. My best friend Alex sat across from me, his usual supportive demeanor replaced with a frown that reflected the concerns of the group. "Do you really think this meeting will change anything?" he asked, his voice low and filled with doubt. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I have to try, Alex. If I don't, I'll lose them for good." The weight of my words hung in the air, and I could see the others shift uncomfortably in their seats. I had to make them understand how deeply I regretted the choices I had made, but the fear of rejection loomed large. As I began to speak, my voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm facade I was attempting to project. "Thank you all for coming. I know things have been difficult since the penalty, and I want to take this opportunity to address your concerns directly." I paused, taking a deep breath to steady myself. But instead of the understanding I hoped for, Jessica, my former ally, interrupted. "You think a few words can fix everything? We lost clients because of your decisions. You've shattered our trust, Stephanie." Her tone was sharp, and I felt the sting of her words deep within me. I had expected resistance, but the intensity of her rejection hit me like a physical blow. I tried to defend myself, to explain my reasoning, but the conversation spiraled into a heated exchange. Anger and frustration flared among us, drowning out my attempts to convey sincerity. Each accusation felt like a dagger, and I could see the disappointment etched on their faces, mirroring the turmoil in my heart. As the meeting came to an abrupt end, I felt a mix of disappointment and despair wash over me. Despite my efforts to reach out, I had failed to create the peace I so desperately sought. The cafe, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground where I had lost the trust of my team. Walking back home, I felt the weight of my failure settling in, a heavy cloak that enveloped me. In the aftermath of that failed attempt, I sat in my home office, staring blankly at my reflection in the window. I had tried to mend the fractures in my relationships, but it seemed that every gesture of goodwill was met with skepticism. My heart ached at the thought of what I had lost, and I knew that I had to make one last push for reconciliation, no matter how daunting it seemed. The path ahead was unclear, but I refused to give up. I would find a way to redeem myself and reclaim the trust that once defined my relationships with my colleagues. The sterile environment of my office felt even more suffocating that day, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing above as I stared at the email on my screen, a notification that would change everything. The subject line read "Contract Suspension Notification," and my heart dropped into my stomach like a stone. I leaned forward in my chair, my palms pressed against the cool surface of my desk, the wood grain rough beneath my fingertips. The faint scent of burnt coffee lingered, a bitter reminder of the long hours I had put into this project, and now it felt like it was all slipping away. "This can't be happening," I whispered under my breath, the words barely escaping my lips. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. Memories of late nights spent strategizing, the laughter of my colleagues during brainstorming sessions, and the hope that had buoyed us all felt like fading echoes. As I opened my eyes again, I could see the reality of the situation reflected in the computer screen, a stark reminder of my failures. With a sudden surge of determination, I felt the weight of betrayal settle heavily on my shoulders. Jessica's name flashed in my mind, a constant reminder of the sabotage that had led to this moment. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had trusted her, and now, here I was on the brink of losing everything. I could almost hear the laughter of my colleagues, the sound now twisted into a cruel mockery of my downfall. In that moment, a fire ignited within me. I need to take action, I thought fiercely. This was the final trigger, the moment that would push me from despair into a plan of revenge. I envisioned the confrontation that awaited Jessica, the satisfaction of exposing her lies and reclaiming my place not just in the company, but in my own life. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, a sound that echoed in the silence of the office. My heart raced as I began to pace, my mind racing through the possibilities. How could I turn this around? I would gather evidence, rally my allies, and confront her with the truth. The thought sent shivers of excitement down my spine, a dangerous thrill that overshadowed my fear. As I looked out the window, the city skyline glimmered under the afternoon sun, a stark contrast to the darkness of my thoughts. I could see the world moving on outside, oblivious to my turmoil, but I was no longer passive. I would not be a victim of this betrayal. This was my moment to reclaim my power, and I would do whatever it took to expose Jessica for who she truly was. With a deep breath, I steeled myself for the path ahead. I was ready to fight back, to take control of my destiny, and nothing would stop me now. This was just the beginning of my plan, and I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The atmosphere in my apartment was thick with anticipation as I sat across from Alex, the dim light casting shadows on the walls adorned with motivational posters that now felt hollow. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but it barely registered over the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. We had gathered here to devise a plan, one that would allow me to expose Jessica's treachery without attracting unwanted attention. My fingers nervously drummed against the table, a rhythmic reminder of the urgency of our mission. Alex leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration, the tension palpable as he spoke. "We need to be strategic about this, Stephanie. If we rush in without a solid plan, it could backfire spectacularly." His words echoed in my mind, a mantra of caution that I knew I had to heed. I nodded, feeling the weight of our shared responsibility pressing down on me. This was not just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life and the respect I had lost. "What if we gather evidence of her manipulation?" I suggested, my voice steadier than I felt. Flashbacks of Jessica's smirking face during the board meetings flooded my mind, each memory a reminder of her deceit. If we can catch her in the act, we can present it to the board and expose her for who she really is. Alex's eyes lit up with enthusiasm, and for a moment, the tension in the room shifted. "Yes, if we can document her interactions with clients and her underhanded tactics, it would be irrefutable. We just need to make sure we're discreet." I could feel the adrenaline surging through my veins, a blend of excitement and nervousness. The thought of finally turning the tables on Jessica ignited a fire within me. Yet doubts lingered in the back of my mind. What if our plan was discovered? What if I lost everything again? As we continued to brainstorm, the possibility of retribution became more tangible. Each idea we exchanged felt like a step closer to reclaiming my power. I pictured the moment when I would confront Jessica, her smug facade crumbling as I laid out the evidence. The vision fueled my resolve. Before we wrapped up our planning session, I took a deep breath, my heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. "We have to be careful," I reminded Alex. "This has to be executed flawlessly. I can't afford any mistakes." The gravity of our undertaking hung heavy in the air, but with Alex by my side, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. The plan was set in motion, and I was ready to reclaim my narrative, one calculated move at a time. The fluorescent lights in the conference room flickered overhead, casting a cold, sterile glow over the assembled faces of my colleagues. The air was thick with tension, a palpable charge that settled heavily on my shoulders as I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, a distant reminder of the world beyond these walls, but in this moment, it felt as though time had stopped. All that mattered was reclaiming my truth. Jessica sat at the head of the long table, her expression a mask of calm indifference, but I could see the slight twitch in her fingers, a telltale sign of her unease. The polished surface of the table reflected my own resolve, a reminder of the strength I had found in the chaos of recent events. I stood heart racing as my colleagues whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between us. Would they side with me or with her? The stakes felt impossibly high. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing in my stomach. I could feel a bead of sweat trickle down my spine as I locked eyes with Jessica, who raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "I know there have been misunderstandings and hurt feelings, but it's time for the truth to come out." As I spoke, memories flashed through my mind. The camaraderie we once shared, the laughter that echoed through the hallways, now replaced by whispers of betrayal. I remembered the moments when Jessica had smiled at me, her friendliness masking the ulterior motives that would soon unravel everything. "I have evidence that directly contradicts the narrative that's been spun around me," I continued, my heart pounding with each word. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, their expressions a mix of disbelief and curiosity. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder filled with emails and documents, placing it on the table with a deliberate thud. The sound reverberated through the room, a signal that I was no longer willing to be a pawn in Jessica's game. Jessica's facade cracked ever so slightly as she leaned forward, her gaze narrowing. "What are you trying to prove, Stephanie? This is utterly ridiculous," she shot back, her voice dripping with feigned confidence. I could see the flicker of panic behind her steely exterior, and it fueled my determination. "I'm trying to prove that I will not be silenced or reduced to a mere scapegoat for your failings," I fired back, the words tasting like victory on my tongue. The room held its breath, the charged silence amplifying the weight of my declaration. I could feel the energy shifting, the tide beginning to turn in my favor. I took a step closer, my pulse racing as I faced my former ally, now my adversary. "You orchestrated this betrayal, Jessica, and it's time everyone knows it. You manipulated the situation to serve your ambitions, and I have the proof to back it up." I gestured toward the folder, my heart hammering as I prepared to lay bare the truth. The anticipation hung heavy in the air, an electric current that ignited my resolve. With each passing second, the tension mounted, and I could see the realization dawning on the faces of my colleagues. Jessica's eyes widened, the mask of control slipping as the realization of her impending downfall dawned on her. I felt a rush of satisfaction, a sense of power surging through me as I took a deep breath, ready to deliver the final blow. "This ends with me taking back my narrative and my career," I declared, my voice strong and unwavering. The room erupted into a chorus of shocked gasps, and I could see the wheels turning in their minds, the moment of truth unraveling before them. I was ready to reclaim my place, not just in this company, but in the very essence of who I was. My heart raced with exhilaration, knowing that I had finally taken control of my destiny. As I prepared to share the evidence that would expose Jessica's manipulation, a sense of calm washed over me. The battle was not just against her, it was against the betrayal that had threatened to define me. I looked around the room, feeling the weight of their support begin to shift in my favor. I was ready to face the aftermath, knowing that the truth would set me free. The aftermath of the confrontation with Jessica weighed heavily on my mind as I sat in the dim light of my living room, the flickering flames of the fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of burnt cedar, a comforting aroma that contrasted sharply with the turmoil churning inside me. I had finally confronted the source of my betrayal, yet the victory felt hollow, like a bittersweet pill lodged in my throat. As I sank into the plush sofa, I could still hear Jessica's cutting remarks echoing in my ears, her words wrapping around me like a shroud. I had expected resistance, but the venom in her tone had caught me off guard. "You think you can just walk in here and take back control? You're delusional, Stephanie." Her laughter had been sharp, a cruel reminder of the trust I had misplaced. I had fought back against her accusations, my voice steady as I laid bare the truth, but the confrontation had drained me, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the choices I had made. The tension at the office was palpable, colleagues whispering in corners, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. I had taken a firm stand, ready to expose the betrayal, yet the fallout from that decision lingered like a shadow. I could sense the skepticism in their eyes, questioning whether I was truly capable of leading us forward. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Alex, my best friend, asking to meet for coffee. As I stepped into the cafe, the warm, inviting atmosphere enveloped me, a stark contrast to the chill of uncertainty that had settled in my heart. I spotted him at a corner table, his expression serious yet supportive. "How are you holding up?" he asked, concern etched on his brow. I took a deep breath, the steam from my coffee rising like a fog around us. "I'm trying to find my footing again, but it's hard. I need to show them that I can be the leader they need, but I'm scared I've lost their trust for good." I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air, a confession of my deepest fears. Alex leaned forward, his voice earnest. "You've already taken the hardest step by confronting Jessica. Now it's about rebuilding. They need to see your commitment to change and your willingness to listen. You can't do this alone." "Let them in," his words resonated with me, igniting a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. I realized that while the confrontation had been necessary, the real work lay ahead, proving that I could lead with integrity and empathy. As I sipped my coffee, the warmth spreading through me felt like a promise, a reminder that I was not alone in this journey. In the days that followed, I took deliberate steps to reconnect with my team, organizing an open forum where everyone could voice their concerns and suggestions. The response was overwhelming, a mixture of skepticism and cautious optimism. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as I prepared to address them, ready to acknowledge my mistakes and share my vision for the future. During the meeting, I stood before my colleagues, the weight of their gazes both intimidating and reassuring. I shared my journey, the lessons learned from the betrayal, and my commitment to a more collaborative approach. As I opened the floor for discussion, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a collective willingness to engage, to heal. By the end of the meeting, I could see the walls beginning to crumble. Colleagues who had once been distant began to share their thoughts, their voices blending into a chorus of hope. I realized then that while the path to redemption would be long and fraught with challenges, it was one I was ready to embrace. I had taken the first steps toward rebuilding trust, and with each conversation, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take root. As I returned home that evening, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. This was not just about reclaiming my career, it was about rebuilding the relationships that mattered most. And as I closed my eyes that night, I understood that true leadership meant embracing vulnerability, listening, and growing alongside those I led. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I would not face it alone. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting warm golden rays through the office windows, illuminating the remnants of what had been a tumultuous journey. As I sat at my desk, the familiar scent of fresh paper and ink surrounded me, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee lingering from the morning. I took a moment to reflect on the chaos that had unfolded, the betrayals and the hard-fought battles that had led me here. It was a bittersweet victory, but I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. The wounds were still fresh, yet I knew I had emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future with renewed clarity. I glanced around the office, where whispers of camaraderie began to fill the air again, laughter slowly replacing the tension that had once suffocated us. My colleagues were no longer just faces in a crowd. They were allies, united in our shared mission to rebuild what had been damaged. I remembered the conversations we had during the open forum, the vulnerability we all displayed, and how it had forged a bond that felt unbreakable. It was a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always a glimmer of hope waiting to be rekindled. As I prepared to leave for the day, I felt a surge of determination. I wanted to inspire others, to show them that even in the face of betrayal, one could rise again, reclaiming their narrative and their power. I envisioned sharing my story, not just as a tale of caution, but as a beacon of hope for anyone navigating the treacherous waters of corporate politics. It was time to embrace the lessons learned and use them to empower others on their journeys. With a final glance at the office, I stepped out into the bustling city streets, the cool evening air wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. I knew my journey was far from over, but I felt ready to face whatever came next. I had regained my voice, and now it was time to share it with the world. I turned to the camera, a smile lighting up my face, and said, "Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell."